Thank you for tuning in to our devotional today. And on behalf of the elders, I'd like to thank you for your support and your kind words to us as we make difficult decisions during this very unusual time. I want you to know that we're still meeting and discussing things that pertain to our congregation, and we will be communicating very soon some things concerning the month of July that will be of interest to you. And we certainly hope that we're making decisions that benefit the entire congregation as best we can. And we certainly covet your prayers. I've always enjoyed studying Bible characters, knowing that they're humans just like we are, have the same strengths and weaknesses that many of us do. And so when you look at the Bible characters, you look for those strengths that you can learn from. And today I'd like for us to focus on Caleb, an Old Testament character. Not a lot said about Caleb in the scriptures, but there's enough said about him that we can certainly glean three strong characteristics that he had that would serve us well to try to emulate those strengths of character that Caleb possessed. Caleb is probably best known for being one of the two spies that went into the land that brought back a positive report. And certainly he and Joshua were in the minority. You're knowing him for that. You recall the story. Moses had led the children of Israel out of Egypt, some 2 million strong. And after the 10 plagues and then the crossing of the Red Sea and other miraculous and mighty works that God had performed that they had seen. And now they were at the threshold of the Promised Land. And it was time to enter. Before they did, however, in Numbers chapter 13, God instructs Moses to choose a leader from each of the 12 tribes to serve as a scout or a spy to go into the land and to check it out before they entered. So Moses chose those 12 leaders, and from the tribe of Judah, Caleb was chosen. Moses had instructions for them. When they went into the land, he told them to look for certain things. Look at the people. Are there many or are there few? Are they weak or are they strong? How about their cities? Are they fortified or not? And look at the land. Is it fertile? In particular, do they have fruit trees? And if you have a chance, bring back some samples of that fruit. So with these instructions, along with Moses instructing them on what direction to enter from, they crossed the desert and entered into the hill country near Hebron. That, of course, is where the descendants of Anak were located, giants in the land. Those descendants were between 7 and 9 feet tall. When I read that, I thought about Jay Mundy. He would just been a short guy there in Hebron. But that's another thought. And they went on from there to past Jerusalem, on up some 100 miles north into Rehob, and then from there back down. They also passed through the valley of Eshcol. And there they cut a single bunch of grapes. And that bundle of grapes was so large that it took 2 men to carry it on a pole. And for 40 days they scouted out the land, and then they returned to the entire community and to Moses, and they gave their report. The scriptures say they reported to the whole assembly and to Moses, and this is the account they gave to Moses. And this is in chapter 13 of Numbers, along about verse 27. We went into the land which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. And here is its fruit. They brought the samples back. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. All this is true. And we even saw descendants of Anak there, the giants. We know the cities are fortified because archaeologists have discovered ruins of cities from that time that were 25 feet, the walls were 25 feet tall and 20 feet thick. So all the things they said were true. And the people became scared. They sowed fear among the people. Basically, they were saying that we cannot do this. They left out the one major factor, and that was God. And then Caleb enters the story. Verse 30 says, "Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses." And that's the first characteristic I wanted us to look at that Caleb possesses. That strength of character. He had great courage. It took a lot of courage to stand before this large multitude of people and to go against his 10 brothers and get up and say something that was not going to be very popular and was going to be disputed immediately. In order to do that, in order to possess that kind of courage, you really need 3 things. First, you need to have the facts. And Caleb did. He had been there himself. He had seen it himself. He was convicted of what he believed. Number 2, you got to have the right attitude. And that is, Caleb certainly did because he trusted God. More about that later. And thirdly, you got to state clearly what you believe. And he certainly did. So the first strength of character for Caleb is his courage. How he quieted that large multitude that were spouting negativity, I don't know. Maybe he had some divine help from God, but he was able to quiet the crowd. Now that shows leadership within itself. And then he very forcefully, in one sentence, made the following statement: "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." Now, obviously, Caleb there is referring to the we. He's not just talking about the 2 million Israelites here. He's talking about the fact that God would be the general that would lead them into the land. So a second strong characteristic of Caleb was his total belief in God, his unwavering faith in God. And immediately, of course, they said, "We can't attack these people. They're just too strong for us. And we look like grasshoppers in their sight." And so this is something that Caleb and Joshua had to fight against. And they did. Of course, Moses and Aaron had to go to God on their behalf that he would not destroy the entire group. But here's what Joshua and Caleb had to say. They tore their clothes. They were dismayed that the people were rebelling. "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them." They're not going to devour us, we're going to devour them. Their protection is gone, whether they knew it or not, because the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. But the people, unfortunately, believed the 10 spies. They believed the majority, the 83%. They did not believe Joshua and Caleb. And so God said, "Since you have rebelled against me and you've not believed in me, you will be punished. You will be given 1 year of wandering in the wilderness for each day that the spies spend in the land, 40 years. And only Joshua and Caleb, over the age of 20, will be allowed to enter the promised land." And then in verse 24, here's what God has to say to Moses about Caleb. "But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it." That's the promise that God made. So we have his courage, we have his unwavering faith in God, and now the third characteristic of Caleb I want us to look at we have to fast forward 45 years. The Israelites have entered the land. They have, for the most part, defeated all the kings. They have won the victories, and now they are ready to assign territory to each tribe. Before Joshua does this, his old friend Caleb comes to him, and he basically says, you remember the promise that God made me. Here's what Caleb has to say. You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land, and I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I have, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. That land was the city of Hebron and the surrounding area where the giants, descendants of Anak, lived. And then comes one of my favorite speeches in all the Old Testament. I get fired up every time I hear it, and I'd like to read it to you. Caleb says this, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out and to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there, the giants. Their cities were large and fortified, but the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, as he has said. So Joshua blessed Caleb and gave him Hebron, and there was peace in the land and a rest from war. I leave you with this thought. Can we, like Caleb, have the courage, the faith, and the determination to fight the giants and to claim the promise that God has given us? Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you Sunday.